My name is Richard Bijster from a company called Route 2 Education Technology, and we export in the education sector. And this is what we do. We make touchscreen computer tables and flexible classroom equipment for all levels of education, specifically targeted at Key Stage 1 and 2, the early years sector, and then Key Stage 3 and above. So we have specific products which are targeted at specific levels of education, with supporting software in there as an extra to make sure that the products are suitable. So I'm here to talk to you about education today and exporting in education, and three particular areas we're going to talk about. Understanding your product and your target audience. We'll concentrate quite a bit on that. How to decide which markets to enter, which is again very interesting, and working with local partners and how to find a good agent. I'm still working on that one myself in various parts of the world, but it is a vital part of the whole firmament, if you like. So exporting is a developing market for us. We've been in it for a couple of years, but it is still reasonably new. And we're in it because of two particular reasons. First of all, there is a huge market out there for the products that we're making. We've discovered that in the UK. And second of all, despite what George Osborne said yesterday about the levels of British education, it is perceived very positively around the world. So no matter where you go, everybody has good things to say about British education, and they still like the fact that if products are made in Britain. Our products are made in Yorkshire, so that's always a positive for us. So I want to share with you bits and bobs, and hopefully at the end of the session learn one or two bits and bobs too, about the exporting sector, things that we've learned, things that we've picked up. I won't be able to give you many answers, but there will certainly be a lot of questions that you guys might be able to use and move forward on as you start your export journey. So, one of the biggest things that I've learned, and incidentally, I don't know if UKTI knew this when they asked me to do this, but I'm currently completing an MBA in international business, so it's quite relevant. And one of the things that I've learned in my travels and through my studies as well is the cultural issues that you can come across. And if you haven't got the cultural issues right, you can shoot yourself in the foot very quickly. So, understanding your target audience. A chicken company called Frank Perdue's Chicken. Their slogan was, "It takes a strong man to make a tender chicken." But when it was translated into Spanish for the Mexican market, it read as, the Vauxhall Nova. Lots of people probably know about this. In Spanish it means it doesn't go. The triumph, yes, and in English as well sometimes. And the triumph acclaim, a rough translation is the triumph acclaim, when for the German market was the Sieg Heil. So, and one that I came across, I was doing a show in Paris with my son who speaks fluent French, and there was a company, now this is slightly apocryphal because I can't remember the exact name of the company, but the translation was the original sound signing education regime or something like that. But they decided to call their company by the acronym. Okay, so lots of issues to avoid. And lastly, a massive baby food company called Gerber started to export to Africa, and it wasn't until they realised the sales were really low that they realised that a lot of their African market couldn't read, and they bought the products by seeing what was on the jar. So the ingredients were what was pictured on the jar. So that quickly changed as well. So some things to avoid. Our experiences in the export market, specifically in the Middle East, Australia and Europe. The Middle East, really interesting. Very, very good market for the British education sector across the board. But again, some things to really easily avoid. I had a discussion with somebody who I was due to meet, a reseller in Dubai. I couldn't make it and had to let them down. And because I'd let them down, they didn't want to deal with us again. They considered that a real insult, and I've had to work awfully hard to get back into their good books. Australia, You would think that Australia's got a very similar culture to us, and indeed it has. Unfortunately, their health and safety laws, their employment laws are about twice as stringent as ours are. When I was setting up a show in Brisbane, I was carrying a box the size of a shoebox, and I got stopped by the security guard and told I had to put it down until I got a high-vis jacket on. Otherwise, they would eject me from the building. So lots of lessons as well. Europe. Really easy to export to Europe at the moment, depending on what happens in the vote in June, of course. Obviously, no issues with tariffs, very, very easy to do. However, culturally, massively different. Although what I've just said about Australia, it's a lot easier to deal with Australians, in my view, than it is to deal with the Spanish or the Greek or even the French. The French certainly have a different understanding of urgency and getting on with things. And that doesn't make us right and them wrong, it just makes things very, very different. So which markets to enter? A really good question, and there are lots and lots of different things to think about in that. The first one is the market and the culture and the concept of foreignness. The things that I've talked about so far and the way different countries work, this concept of foreignness and basically being put into an environment about which you know very little and putting your foot in it very quickly is something which a lot of companies do. I did it with the guys in the Middle East a little bit. It's easy to do. Tariffs, got to consider the tariffs. Europe, no tariffs, fantastic. You can just send the stuff abroad. And depending on what your product is and depending on the country which you're going to export to, the tariffs can range from anything from 1 or 2% to 20%, which might make your market completely unusable for you, might make it completely useless for any partner you wanted to work with. They wouldn't make any money. Certification, the stuff that we deal with is obviously computer-based and has to have electrical certification for it. Every country around the world has its own certification to allow things through the borders. Europe, fantastic, CE marked, everything can travel anywhere. You start going abroad, you need different certification, you need different power supplies, and you need to get that signed off by various authorities before you can export. And partners and how to enter the market, that's a really, really good question. Are you going to use an agent or a reseller or a company representative? You can put somebody on the ground there, but if you do that, you're actually starting up a new business in some ways in that company with that organisation. It can be very expensive, there can be an awful lot of hoops to jump through. And so a lot of companies will simply use an agent or a reseller or even do it directly from the UK. Now, if you're selling software, easy peasy. If you're selling the bloody great heavy things that we sell, nightmare. Because you've got to get the certification, you've got to get them exported, you've got to pay the tariffs, and so on. Are you going to do a joint venture or an informal partnership? Lots and lots of different questions here to ask about how you're going to set things up. And then going back to this one again at the end, the other things to think about in this area, exchange rates, national educational spend, educational IT spend, technological development, the openness of openness to IT in the classroom, the language challenges. Now, when we were in France at a show 2 years ago, displaying our products, we had a teacher come onto our stand, really good English, said, "This is fantastic, we haven't got a hope." The school that she's at has got one, at that stage, had one interactive whiteboard, and they'd got it 6 months ago and thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And this is a modern, developed country 30 miles across the water, but just with very different educational outlook. My children went to school in France, we lived there for a little while, and the attitude to education is very much still Victorian. Everything is learned by rote, and everything is, technology is for leisure, it's not for learning. And that's a very, very, it's a very difficult market for us to get into. The only places we've sold to in France so far have been international schools. So, this is another thing I want to talk about. Certainly with the technical stuff, support and after sales, you have to be set up to be able to support your clients in foreign countries, either through your reseller or yourself. We have learned from bitter experience in dealing with Australia that the people we thought would be okay with various technicalities of the product aren't, and we are having to spend time getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to speak to different nurseries and schools in order to make sure that their products are working correctly. So we won't make that mistake again, but it's an important lesson to learn. Make sure you have the support, and I've tried to reiterate that in a fairly clumsy manner, just by it is all about support and after sales, and anything that we do in this country is as well. And if it falls over because it's 11,000 miles away, you're still going to lose your market. Okay, so summary and conclusions. Know your market, know the customs, the language and the culture. So many traps to fall into there, and if you can use somebody on the ground who has that knowledge, you can partner up with somebody, it will make your life easier. Know the add-ons, the tariffs, the shipping, the certification. Somebody said to me the other day that exporting is easy in principle, but because every country almost is different, every time you do it, you have to start at the beginning again. So it's in principle it's easy. You know the things you've got to cover off, but getting the answers is never particularly as quick as you'd want it to be. If you're going to go into the market, choose a market with an initially similar culture, one that you can fit into more easily. And then if you want to expand your exporting options, you can go from there. Retain as much control as possible. And I'm thinking there about the support side of things and making sure that that's done while making use of the local knowledge on the ground of your partners. Be led by the people on the ground, be led by the support you can get, but always question and always stop if you're unsure. Because it's quite possible that what you think might be happening is something quite different, and that's happened to us as well. And use all the support available to you. UKTI, BISA, Chambers of Commerce, lots of other non-governmental organisations as well. Very, very helpful in working out the people to talk to on the ground, in working out what the tariffs will be, and in just understanding the difficulties that you might have in entering any particular market.